I'd like to welcome those joining us online today. It's lovely to have you with us. We hope that you will be blessed by the message today as well. Why don't we give them a welcome? As I said, this has been an interesting series to think about doing. And you always think of it's sort of funny, you always think of, oh, what if they think that? Or what if we upset someone? Or what if we offend someone? And Colin takes care of all that side of it, yeah. But, the fact is, relationships are under attack. Let's be real about it. I don't think relationships have been under attack more ever before. And I'm not just talking about marriage relationships here. I'm talking about every relationship that is in your life, whether it's with your children or with your parents, or whether it's with workmates or friends or whatever. You know, we have an enemy who doesn't want us to be in good relationship. He wants to cause discord. And so our prayer is that you will take the principles presented in this series and apply them to every relationship in your life, because pretty well most of them you can apply to every single relationship. And so we may sound, and obviously we are going to lean a little bit more towards talking about marriage relationships, but if you're not married, plan to be married, have never been married, whatever your current status is, you can take these principles and apply them. Is that okay? The other thing that we were really brave and nobody did anything about was we put out these cards. They're available at the info desk or the Next Steps desk. And on it, if you've got a question about relationships, you can write that and send it and leave it at the table or pop it in the giving station box. And we're going to have a go at answering your questions. So far, we've got none. So that means you're all very happily married, relating to everybody around you. So that's awesome. And it also means you understood everything Colin talked about last week. Well done, darling. But if you've got some questions about relationships, you can fill those in, and we're going to have a go at answering them. We're going to use a few other people to help with that if we get questions. If not, then you're stuck with me and Colin. So, so have a think about that. We are not saying that we will answer every single question that is submitted, okay? A little disclaimer there, because we're not stupid. But if some come in and we think that it would benefit everybody here for that question to be answered, we will do it. Is that all right? Sounds good. God never designed us to go through life alone. We weren't created to do that. He designed us to go through life in relationship because He is a relational God. He's not there on His own. We've got Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We call it what do we call it? The Trinity. I woke up, anyway, another story. It's called the Trinity. God is in relationship. He's about relationship, and He created us to be in relationship. So the key verse for this series that Colin presented last week was out of Lamentations, and it's chapter 3, verses 19 to 23, and it says, I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. You've got no idea how many versions of the Bible I looked up to try and find better words than that. Bitterness and the gall. But basically what it comes down to is it's describing someone who's in the pits. They've been through a stink relationship. They've had something awful happen to them and they feel like their life is a mess. And it says, I will remember them. I'll remember these things. And my soul is downcast within me. When we've been through something bad and we think back on it, that's exactly how we feel. When we think about it, we feel stink, okay? That's what it is. But the writer goes on to say, yet this, when that happens, when my mind goes there, yet this I call to mind. So he had a plan. And therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Last week Colin posed the question, are great relationships possible? And absolutely they are possible. And sometimes there's a few things that we need to do and some choices that we need to make. But that verse in Lamentation tells us that no matter what condition we're in our relationships, there's hope. And here's why. Because God has the original design for relationships and it is good. Last week, we heard that the number one key to healthy relationships is to seek God. That is the first thing that we should do. We need to choose to live a God-first life. You know, God wants you to have great relationships. He wants you to have great relationships. He doesn't want you to just survive the statistics on marriage that say that 1 in 2 marriages will end in divorce. He wants to help you completely turn those odds around. And the first step is to simply seek God. You know, our goal in teaching this series is not just to help you survive marriage, all right? You don't get married and 15 years later or whatever, you're going, I've just got to get to 50. I'll make it. It's not about surviving, okay? Our goal is to help you thrive in marriage and in every relationship that you're in. Whether it's your friends, whether it's marriage, or whether you're waiting to get married, whatever it is, we want to help you thrive, and the principles we'll talk about will help you with that. God's design for relationships is laid out at the very beginning of the Bible. The first relationship in the Bible is Adam and Eve, and that's in just the first couple of chapters of the Bible. There's a relationship happening, a God-created relationship. Genesis 2:24 says, this explains, okay, so this is about a relationship. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. So God's foundation, his design for relationship is unity. It should be in unity. A relationship should be in unity. Psalm 133 verse 1 and verse 3, it says, how good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity. That word brothers doesn't mean literally brothers, okay? People, couples, friends, families, when they live together in unity. And in verse 3 it says, for there, in that place of unity, the Lord bestows his blessing, even life forevermore. It says it's good, it's pleasant, which means, you know, it's the best, it's delightful. And the blessing which God commands on those that dwell in unity is life forevermore. They are everlastingly blessed. How cool, what a great promise. But what destroys unity? Because we see disunity in so many places. Fights, disagreements. So today, we're going to learn how to fight fair. Or, in other words, how to have a good fight. Who's really good at fighting? Oh, you don't have to put your hands up. Someone just said, who's good at losing? I'm not sure why Colin asked me to do this part of the series, but... The fact is, let's be real, we all fight. We all fight. Couples fight. There's no perfect couple, all right? Even Adam and Eve had a fight over who should we take it? No, you take it. But why do we fight and argue over things? Part of it's because we have the sin nature that we're born with, the self-absorbed nature that wants our own way. And how do we know that we have that? Well, look at your children. How old are they when they start to fight? Come on. And they don't seem to have any problem doing it, right? The reason couples fight is because we're all a bit different from each other. We've got different personalities, different upbringings, different needs, different likes, different dislikes, different interests, different versions of what should be spread all over the lounge floor. Does anyone else have a husband that puts his fishing rods all over the lounge floor? Anybody identify with me? Not one? Oh, you've got one? Oh, there's another one down there. But not just for one day. Here's a little hint, ladies. Just don't say anything. Just don't say anything. And eventually they'll fall over it themselves. And they'll put it away. You know, many of those differences, we're different from each other, and many of those differences, apparently according to statistics, 69% of them, can't even be resolved, and they won't ever be resolved. We have to learn to live with them. Conflicts are a reminder that a relationship is two different people working together to understand differences and love each other despite their flaws. So the question today is not, do we fight? Because we know we all do that. The question is, how do we fight fair? We need to learn how to fight fair and how to have healthy arguments. It might sound weird, but it's actually very, very good. There's a man called John Gottman who's apparently a really well-known psychologist to do with marriage and relationships, and I looked him up and he's done a lot of stuff. Don't know that he's a Christian though. But he says that you can accurately judge whether a relationship will work or not by how a fight ends up. How interesting is that? What matters is not the fight itself, and especially not what it is about. What matters is how each party responds in that situation. And so we need to learn how to fight in a way that doesn't cause harm, but instead increases understanding. And this is tied just so closely to Colin's message last week on seeking God first, because good, healthy fights come out of a healthy heart. And it starts with us being secure in who we are in God. That's the starting point. Because if we're not secure in who we are in God, things will go to custard really quick, I'll tell you. We need to be secure in God and not need our self-esteem to come from others. We don't need our self-esteem to come from our spouse or others in our family or our friends. Instead, we need to know who we are in God. So there's two wrong turns that we take when we're trying to resolve conflict. And the first one is we fight the wrong enemy. We fight the wrong enemy in our relationships. Somehow we believe the lie that the person we're married to or the person we're arguing with is the enemy. But the Bible tells us in Ephesians chapter 6 that our battle isn't against flesh and blood. We're in a spiritual battle. And as much as you might think your wife is an angel, she's still flesh and blood, okay? We've confused ourselves and we've decided that the person that we're in relationship with is the enemy. And we look at that person and we make them the enemy and we ignore the fact that the real enemy is actually there and he's working to destroy our relationship. Satan has a despicable plan, okay? A despicable plan. You see, he's a despicable enemy, and his desire is to destroy marriages and families and ultimately destroy the fabric of our society by destroying every relationship within our society. It's really important that we understand this and understand who it is that we're battling. Jesus said in Mark 3:25, if a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. That's why we need to learn how to fight fair. And that's why we need to learn to recognise who the real enemy is. Our spouses are not our enemies. The second wrong turn we take in our arguments is we're driven by wrong motives. James chapter 4, the first 3 verses says, this is a great little passage of scripture. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something but don't get it. You kill and covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. Notice how many times the words you and your are in there. And what happens is we start operating out of these motives of self-interest, self-promotion, self-defense. And we start to demand our right to be right. Ooh, anyone know what I'm talking about here? When sometimes you're actually dead wrong. You know, I just keep referring back to last week. You know, the secret to successful relationships is a God-first life. And what we've done is we've allowed ourselves to move into a self-first life. And what we're doing is we're actually demanding our right to be right. The greatest relationships take place between two servants, when one person lays aside what they need and makes the needs of that other person more important than their own. Ouch. I know there's times I don't want to do that. And ultimately, unfortunately, most of us are better at maintaining our right to be right. This is a really common problem, and the Bible addresses it in several places. But in Philippians 2, it says, "Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded." Now, you would think that Paul was writing this to a married couple, wouldn't you? This was to the church. So that means it applies to every relationship that you're in, including your marriage. Make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one. Unity in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. This is such great marriage counselling. But again, you can apply it to every relationship because that's how it was written. It was written to the church. You know, we need to decide whether the issue we're fighting about is really worth fighting for. Because I'll tell you what, most of the time it's not. And we fight over the most stupid things. I said to Colin, think of something we've argued about that I can use as an example. Because we have arguments, okay? I know we look perfect, but we're not. But I can't remember anything. That's how important they were. What did we argue about? I don't know. I mean, I can remember years ago where we had this doozy argument about something. This was way back. This is when we had little children. And Colin's mature response was always to leave, which is really helpful. Anyone know what I mean? I'm not disclosing anything he hasn't already disclosed, by the way. And so he jumps on his bike and rides off down the farm, and I'm upset at home and I don't want to leave it like that and I want it sorted out. So I stewed there for a while and thought probably not nice thoughts about him. But I just remember in my heart, I was like, oh no, he's gone on the tractor. What if he rolls the tractor and dies and we've just had this argument? So what did I do? I down the farm to find him and sort out that argument. Well, what did we argue about? I have no idea. I have no idea. And was it worth arguing about? Probably not.
Your hair budget?
No, it was not. Couldn't afford that in those days. You know, in Proverbs, if you want really, really great advice, read Proverbs. Okay, there is so much great advice for relationships in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 18 verse 19 says, "An offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars." So if you're going to have an argument with someone, make sure it's worth arguing about, because there's every chance you could risk your relationship, risk your friendship, risk your marriage over something that's not even worth arguing about. And God's trying to tell us something else here. When we're fighting dirty, okay, and all that stuff, when we're not fighting fair, we're destroying our friends, we're destroying our spouses, we're actually destroying the people we love. Why do we do that? You know, all couples fight. We're sinful. We have this sin nature, and we're radically different from one another. So we're going to have disagreements. All couples fight, but healthy couples fight fair. This might sound like a bit of an oxymoron, but you'll see as I go along how this works. Healthy couples fight for resolution. Unhealthy couples fight dirty. They fight to win. And you may be sitting here thinking, well, yeah, in our relationship we've been fighting with each other, and I realise now that we've been fighting the wrong enemy. But let me give you hope today. There's an answer and there's hope. God wants to recreate your relationships. So how do we take this pathway that we're on, where we've made perhaps a wrong turn, and we feel like, maybe you're feeling today like you're running towards, a road where the bridge is out and everything's going to collapse around you, in your relationships and maybe in your family, when you feel like everything important to you is in jeopardy. God's saying today, turn around and go in the other direction. It's very clear. Turn around and go in the other direction, because there's hope. So how do we do that? By learning to fight fear. So today I'm going to give you 6 pointers on how to have a good fight. Nudge the person next to you and say, I'm not wanting you to listen too hard. You don't need to hear this. Okay, first point. Learn the wisdom of careful response instead of reacting. Learn the wisdom of response instead of reacting. Proverbs 15 verse 1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. How wise. Disagreement is normal, disrespect isn't. Disagreement is normal, disrespect isn't. Respect the person above the issue. We forget that a lot. We put the issue up here and we put the person down here. Get it the other way around. No matter how big a deal it is to you, remember what's most important. And I know as Colin and I have gone on in our marriage, that's definitely become, for me, it's like, actually, we have an argument over something stupid. And I'm like, it's so unimportant. What's more important to me is having my relationship with him clear, with nothing in the way, nothing causing any blockages. And years ago I might have stood my ground a little bit more, but actually you get a little bit wiser as you get a little bit older. And it's so not worth fighting over. It's like, seriously? What's more important? Actually, I love this man. And I want our relationship to stay clear and good, because he's the most important person in my life. That's what it comes down to. And he's wonderful. If we disrespect each other during conflicts, then those conflicts become very destructive. Don't turn conflict into combat, okay? Don't let your anger rule things. The goal of a healthy argument is unity, okay? It's not necessarily agreement. We've had certain things that we've discussed vigorously, and we haven't ended up in agreement, but we've decided that our relationship's more important, and you work around that. James chapter 1, verses 19 to 20 says, take note of this, okay? So if in the Bible, if it says take note of this, then you should take note, all right? Everyone, not just some people, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger doesn't produce the righteousness that God desires. It doesn't produce the results God's looking for, the way he's created us to live. He wants us to have the very best in our relationships, but anger doesn't produce that. Verse 19, it says we should be quick to listen. So I'm saying to you today, stop and listen. Just stop, okay? Stop. Close your mouth. Some of us find it harder than others, okay? And that is not gender defining either. Stop and listen carefully. Most of us react rather than responding, and we get into a disagreement and we spout out the first thing that comes into our mind. James goes on to say we should be slow to speak. And we have that initial reaction, and 99 times out of 100 it's the wrong one. Anyone identify with me on that one where you've gone, I wish I had said that? Proverbs 18 verse 2 says, fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. Proverbs is great. In chapter 21, verse 23, it says, watch your words and hold your tongue. You'll save yourself a lot of grief. We need to stop and listen carefully before we let those words out of our mouths. Ephesians 4:29 says, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up, according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. You've probably heard the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. If you're over a certain age, I don't know whether kids today know that saying, but it's actually not true at all. I mean, sticks and stones will break your bones. We know that's true. But actually, words are really, they do damage, serious, serious damage. They inflict pain, and we can't reel them back in, okay? It's not like a fishing rod where you can't push rewind. Who wishes they could? Go, take it back, sorry. You can try doing that. Actually, that's a good technique when you've said something and it's like that moment and you know you've said it wrong. You can go, whoops, I just take that back and see what your spouse says. But sometimes it might work. But before you say it, I want you to think about two things. Ask yourself these two questions. Should what I'm about to say ever be said? Should what I'm about to say ever be said? And secondly, should it be said now? I tell you what, we'd change a lot of what we said if we asked those two questions in the heat of an argument before we opened our mouths. You know, behind every complaint or everything that might start an argument is actually it's the longing of the heart. Often it's just the longing of a heart. And we've already read this at the start of James chapter 4. It said, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something but don't get it. I remember we took our kids to Hillsong Conference quite a number of years ago, and there was a brilliant message there about this passage of Scripture. And our kids latched onto it because the person that was doing the message, they said, you know, basically it's saying that when there's a fight, it's because someone really wants something. So when someone starts a fight, just look at them and go, what is it you really want? Well, our kids picked up on it. They were in their late teens. I'll tell you, they had a blast. Every time one of them niggled about something, the other one would look at them and go, so what is it you really want? Which obviously, because they were siblings, really didn't help the situation at all. And be very careful using that. But know that when your spouse sparks about something, there's actually something in their heart, inside, that's not quite right, that it's causing that little reaction to come. They're not just being a nagging wife or a dumb husband, okay? There's something inside that you need to listen to and dig for and find out. What is it that they really want? There's a longing of the heart in there. A longing in the heart. Work out, and also work out what it is that you actually want. Rather than just going off, what is it you actually want? You know, when your husband doesn't turn his socks in the right way for the 50,000th time and you've got to turn them back in the right way to put them in the washing machine. Is it really the socks? I don't think it is. I think what it is, it's like, can you not just honour me by turning, would you do that for me? Would you just, when you take your socks off, take them off the right way so I don't have to? Sounds funny, but I'll tell you, it's those little issues that once the honeymoon's worn off, before that it was like, I'll do anything for him. But then eventually it's like, oh, stinky socks again. She doesn't not love you. She's just asking you to consider her and think of her. I remember we had an upset. This is a lot of years ago. And it was before cell phones. That's how I know it's a lot of years ago. Because then you could go out and you didn't have to have any way of contacting people. Whoa, how about that? And we were very heavily involved in the community in those days, and Colin was on a lot of community organisations and involved in a lot of community events, and particularly over the New Year period, there was a lot of opportunity to do fundraising for the community, and so there were big fundraising events that we were very involved in. And I know this particular time we had 3 different fundraising events in a row over that New Year period. And we were milking cows, and so I would always look after milking the cows because Colin would be committed to these events and stuff like that. And this particular day, I'd come home, brought the kids home, milked the cows, da-da-da. And anyway, he didn't come home. He didn't come home, and he didn't come home, and he didn't come home. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, where is he, where is he, where is he? And he eventually came home at like midnight or something, and I was nearly beside myself, okay, because I had no idea where he was. I was thinking, oh, has he gone in the ditch? I can't leave the children to go and look for him. Where is he? What's happened? And so I was quite upset when he got home, and he was like, well, why were you worried? Wrong answer. Anyone know? Wrong answer. And we had a little discussion at that point. But if he'd said to me, what is it that you really want? I would have said, I just want to know that I'm important enough that you would think of me. And what had happened was they'd had this, after the fundraising event had run into the evening, and then they'd had, I think might have been the bowling club, I don't know, somewhere, golf, I don't know, somewhere, whatever it was. And so they'd been having, people that had participated, they'd had some drinks. And so my big-hearted, kind-hearted, wonderful husband offered to drive people home so they didn't have to drink and drive. But unfortunately, he didn't have a cell phone to call me and didn't think to find a phone to call me. And so I'm sitting at home thinking he's in the ditch somewhere when he was... And so his version of it, you see what happened, his version of it was, I was doing a good thing. But I was doing a good thing. And I was like, you were doing a good thing, but I just want to know that I'm actually first in your mind. And when we worked that out, took a little while, when we worked that out and he began to understand that, I didn't care what he did or when he came home. That wasn't actually the issue at all. I just needed to know that I was actually first in his priorities. That saved us a lot of grief once we actually worked that out. Stop, think, and say why you're upset. Don't just attack each other. Sometimes it's a really great idea to make an agreement ahead of time that if something like that sparks, you pause. Okay, we're going to pause right now, and we're going to cool down, and we're going to come back in a little while. Sounds stupid, but it's a really great plan. The heat of the conflict is not the time to try to fix it. Before you get into conflict, establish some rules of engagement. Here are some good ones very, very quickly. I don't know that you'll get to write them all down, but never call names, okay? Never call each other names. Not helpful. Not helpful at all. Never say never or always. Like, don't say, oh, you never do this, or oh, you always do this. That doesn't help either. Never raise your voice. If it gets heated, back away a step, clear your heads, and then come back together. Never get historical. Jodie Brown, we were talking about this morning. Never get historical. Oh, well, I can remember when you did this. Not helpful. Never threaten divorce. Okay, not even as a joke. Never threaten divorce. Power of words, people. Never, ever threaten divorce. You need to smash that back door in your relationship. It's gone. Not an option. Not one tiny little option. It's too important. And finally, never quote the Bible in a conflict to prove your point, all right? Bad move. There were a man and his wife were arguing one day, and he quoted that scripture that said it's better to live in the corner of a roof than a house with a quarrelsome woman. So she said, well, get up there then. Don't quote the Bible when you're in conflict. That's not what it's for. Instead, like Colin said last week, study the Bible together before you get into conflict. Okay, I'm going to have to keep going real fast. Second thing you can do is learn the discipline of timing. When you want to talk about something that you know might be prickly, ask, is this a good time? Okay, so your husband walks in or your wife walks in after a full, busy day and you've got something that's happened that you need to talk to them about. Think about the timing of it. If they've just walked in and the kids are screaming and there's mess everywhere or there's, whatever's gone on, that's probably not the best time to talk about it. So pick your timing. A huge part of successful communication is determined by timing. Proverbs 15:23 says, everyone enjoys a fitting reply. It's wonderful to say the right thing at the right time. And timing is a huge part of respect as well. Respecting the other person over the issue. Does it really need to be talked about right now when they're tired and they've had a bad day? Thirdly, learn how to reflect the conversation back, and this is to make sure you heard correctly. So when your spouse or the person that you're relating to says something, say to them, so is what you're saying, and then repeat it back to them. Because people don't hear what you say, they hear what they think you say. Who knows that? Misunderstandings. And so repeating it back, you might think, oh, that's stupid. That sounds silly if I go, oh, well, is this what you're saying, and repeat it back to you? But I'll tell you what, it's not as silly as wrecking your relationship. So just say something like, here's what I think I'm hearing you say, and then say in your words what you think they are saying. And quite often you'll find out, no, that's not what they're saying at all, but that's how you've heard it, and then you can clarify it. It gives opportunity for some things. It gives opportunity for you to force yourself to listen. It gives opportunity for your spouse or that other person in the relationship to be affirmed that you're hearing them. It gives them opportunity to give some clarity to it when you're maybe not hearing it right. And then it keeps the focus on the issue. Again, the focus is on the issue, not on the person. Communication isn't just words. The other thing is we hear things in the accent of our upbringing. Okay, so it can be a simple little phrase that you think means nothing, but to that other person, it has huge significance because it was something that was said to them in a very derogatory, angry turn of voice when they were young. So maybe it's don't slam the door. Well, if you've grown up with an adult in the house that every time you slammed the door, they screamed at you, don't slam the door, and it got worse and worse and worse, then when you innocently say that to your spouse, oh, don't slam the door, they're going to react because they've heard it with the accent of their upbringing. That's just a very simple example of it. If I read this, I thought this was really good. If punctuality is important to your partner and you think punctual is arriving no more than an hour late, discuss why it's so important or not important to each other. There's usually a story underneath every strong emotion. Be ready to tell each other your stories and seek the understanding that will help you manage your conflicts skillfully and with compassion. Fourth point, don't underestimate the power of touch. Colin touched on this last week. It's very hard to stay angry when you reach over and hold hands or have a hug. Touch is a form of communication. You need to understand that. It's a powerful form of communication. It's a demonstration of a desire to stay connected. It says, I want to stay connected to you. I don't want this issue to divide us. Touch is actually supernatural, and it's amazing what happens in your brain when you touch. I haven't got time to explain it all today, but it's an electrical impulse of some sort that happens, and it's way beyond what we understand. But touch is one of the most important elements of a relationship. When you ask, there was a survey done on people married over 60 years, and one of the most important things they said to do was hold hands. It can be just holding hands and saying nothing, and it speaks volumes. Jesus knew the power of touch. In Luke 5, he encountered a man with leprosy, and Jewish law forbade touching lepers. They were outcasts. They were considered unclean. You didn't touch a leper. And this leper came to Jesus and asked for help. And what did Jesus do? He didn't just say, go and be healed. He reached out and he touched the man because he understood the supernatural power of touch. So it communicated way more than healing. It communicated a huge message of love and acceptance. Holding hands says way more than we realise. And also, guys, listen to this. This is very, very important. Biologically, a woman is 10 times more sensitive to touch than a man is. And that's because we have more receptors in our skin. It's actually a physical thing. So, guys, they're tougher. Colin hurts himself doing stuff with tools. And I'm like, doesn't that hurt? He's like, yeah. Whereas I'd be going, oh, no, it's really sore. We're more sensitive. And so touch is a very, very powerful form of communication. And I'll tell you, if I'm upset about something, if I'm upset with him about something, the most powerful and probably the most powerful thing he can do is just come and put his arms around me and hold me. Because it tells me that he loves me and that whatever the issue is, we can sort it out. Fifth thing, manage your anger. You need to manage your anger righteously. Ephesians 4, verses 26, 27 says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. This is a really powerful verse, and this is one that every single married couple need to understand the importance of and put into action in their relationship. The night that we got married, I can't tell all this story, but long story. Back in those days, it was always, who knows, it was a bit of a mission to get away after the wedding without being followed in your car. Anyone remember that? So we made this great plan to sneak away with my grandparents in their car. Didn't work, but anyway. But I've had a wonderful heritage of strong marriages right through in my background. Very blessed. And my grandparents had been married for well over 50 years. And I remember that day, my grandfather taking us both by the hand and saying, I've got one piece of advice for you. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. That's the only piece of advice he gave us. And when you go to bed angry, what it does, if you don't sort out an issue on the same day it happens, and you go to bed and you go to sleep, you couples, listen to me, okay? This is serious. This is really, really important. Don't go to sleep. Do not go to sleep until you've sorted it. And I mean that seriously. Colin and I have had some very late nights. But we've put that principle into place. Because you know what? If you go to sleep, that issue takes root. And I'll tell you what, it's magnified and it's way worse the next day. I can remember a couple that we had dealings with that didn't put this principle into place. And I'll tell you, their arguments, they were young marrieds, but their arguments would go on for days, to the point where they would ring me, one would ring me and go, can you please find him and tell him this? Or can you tell her this? They weren't talking to each other, and it went on for days and days and days, and their marriage did reach crisis point. But thank God brought the healing into it, because there was always hope. But don't go to sleep. Sort the issue out, even if it means a late night. Husbands, do not roll over and go to sleep. We're wired differently. Men can do that, okay? They can put the lid on it and go, we'll deal with it tomorrow. And they go off sound asleep. Your wife won't do that, because wives aren't wired like that. We're like, well, everything's wired in together. And so we don't go to sleep. So if you love your wife, don't go to sleep. Persevere and sort the issue out. Best piece of advice, if you take no other piece of advice away, do that. And actually, the verse actually says, don't let the sun go down, which means this man was really wise, because you should start sorting it out at sundown, not just as you go to bed. Okay? Don't give the devil a foothold. Remember who the real enemy is. If we leave it, it just snowballs, gives the foothold to the enemy, gives them a chance to start destroying our marriage and our homes. Don't believe the fight will blow over. It only gets worse. Sort it out. And final one, number 6, never underestimate the miracle of prayer. Colin talked about this last week. Pray for each other and pray together. Because you know what? It's really hard to pray when you're angry. When you've had a fight, it's really hard to pray together. It's hard to stay angry when you pray too. Open your heart to God in front of your spouse. The odds for couples who pray together go from, 50-50 to 1 in 1,240 something for the marriage surviving. Bring God into the centre of your relationship. Praying together, seriously, it's really, really good. Because Colin and I, we've got this thing, like we had that advice from my grandfather, and then we also have agreed we never go to sleep without praying together. So, well, if we've had an argument, we've got a bit of a problem there, haven't we? We sort out the issue so we can pray together. So when there's an issue, go to God first. And something your partner, your friend, your child, your parent, whoever it is, does something that really annoys you, take it to God first. Start with the work in your own heart. And take that time out before you talk about it. I've got one last picture here that I want to show you. This is a very powerful little picture with the triangle, and you've got the husband and the wife, and it could be when you're first in relationship together, you start at the bottom of this triangle and you invite Jesus into your relationship. As each partner draws closer to Jesus, the gap between them lessens. Can you see that? Powerful, powerful principle. Each one of you draws closer to God, you'll draw closer to each other. Can I have the team join me on stage now? Essentially, we're in a spiritual battle to save and protect our marriages and our relationships. Like I said at the start, we've got an enemy who he wants to destroy all relationships. He hates people being in good relationship. And so he's trying to cause division and disunity in marriages and families and friendships. He wants to destroy relationships in churches. He doesn't want people getting on. And the Apostle Paul in the Bible, in the New Testament, he wrote a lot about this. So it must have been a fairly important issue, the fact that he wrote so much about the importance of good relationships and protecting relationships and how to treat one another. And I'd just say to you today, sometimes we apply those principles to our external relationships. We forget to apply them to our marriages. And we treat people outside our home better than we treat the people inside our home. So I'd say to you today, examine your heart. How do you treat your spouse? How do you treat your parents? How do you treat your children? Because those are the relationships that are the most important in your life. And I just want to read to you from Philippians again. And this is written to the church. But I'd say to you today, take this into the relationship, into your marriage, into whatever relationship that you're in right now. And Paul wrote, I beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you've been called by God. And this is where he hits it home. Always, always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other. In your marriage, be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words and slander, as well as all types of evil behaviour. Instead, husbands, wives, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. He goes on in chapter 6, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armour of God. Put on the full armour of God to protect your marriage so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, Put on the full armour of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything, to stand. We want strong marriages in this church. We want strong relationships, strong families, people secure in who they are, so that their friendships and their relationships with their neighbours and their community are good. Unity, the blessing of God on it. Why don't you stand to your feet?